So very briefly, I'm going to walk you through some of the key issues that are involved in campaign finance and our regulations. Like I mentioned earlier, we've always been inherently suspicious about money in politics, but we've not always had a lot of laws put in place to regulate money in politics. It's really been post 1971 that we've made some significant efforts, which have actually made some kind of difference. You have been provided flashcards, so if you look in your little bucket, all of the words that are in yellow are the vocabulary that's associated with this unit. Feel free to get those out, and if you need to copy any definitions as we go along, that's what those are there for. I am scratching the surface, and you may very well have a lot of questions about some of the things I'm talking about. Feel free to just kind of make a note of those, and then when I return, I'll attempt to answer those questions for you if I can. So in 1971 was the first time substantial legislation was passed to actually reduce the impact of money in politics. And the Federal Elections Campaign Act was passed, and what it did several things. The first thing that it did is it created an organization called the FEC. The FEC is the Federal Election Commission. It is part of the executive branch, and their job is to oversee money being donated to federal campaigns. They are a regulatory, they're a body that just exercises oversight to make sure that federal campaigns, so campaigns for the House, campaigns for the Senate, and campaigns for the presidency, are abiding by the law. The second thing that it did is it created a concept called public funding. Remember, this word public always means government funding. So public funding is this idea that we want to make sure that anybody who wants to run for president could run for president. We don't want them to just be from a wealthy background or to run in wealthy circles. And so we set up an opportunity for people to potentially qualify for public funding. So I don't know how many of you have ever filed taxes before, but if you have, one of the last questions on your tax return form says, would you like to contribute $3 to the Presidential Election Fund? If you check yes, $3 of your tax money that would have gone into the Treasury to pay for government goods instead gets diverted to this fund, which is public funding for the presidency only. It doesn't apply to any other federal office. Then, in subsequent election years, if you have a candidate who demonstrates that they're viable, they have to come from a major party. And it could be a third party, but it has to be a party that got at least 5% of the popular vote in the previous election. The candidate has to prove that they have a significant amount of support, that they have raised significant amounts of money in different regions of the country. And if they do that, they can qualify for this public funding, where basically that money then is given to them, usually in the form of matching funds. So they raise $1,000 and we give them $1,000. That's simplifying, but so the money is given to them in terms of public funding, and then they can use that to finance their campaign. Another thing that it did is it established PACs. PAC stands for Political Action Committee. Corporations are not allowed today to donate to political campaigns. Interest groups are not allowed specifically to donate to political campaigns. However, anyone, any group, interest group, corporation, individual, church, mosque, anyone that wants to donate to political campaigns can form what's called a PAC, and then they are allowed to make a donation. Those donations are limited per donation and at the time per total donation. So in other words, if I create Shannon Rosenfeld PAC, at the time I was allowed to donate, let's just make up a number, $2,000. So I could give $2,000 to Hillary Clinton. I could give $2,000 to Donald Trump. I could give $2,000 to Sam Johnson running for House of Representatives, etc. So those individual donations are going to be limited. That money must be funneled through the PAC, and then it's the job of the FEC to monitor that and make sure that the contributions don't exceed the law. The final thing, and this is what's probably the most important, is the Federal Election Campaign Act sets spending limits on what can be spent on a campaign. We think there's too much money in politics. Okay, fine. The law is going to limit. And it's going to say, okay, a candidate can only spend X amount of money during the primary. They can only spend X amount of money during the general election. And it's going to say that they're limited in terms of how much of their own money they're allowed to spend. So if they want to make a donation, so if Hillary Clinton wanted to make a donation to her campaign, she can only donate what I could donate to her campaign. If Donald Trump wants to donate to his campaign, he can only donate, at the time under this law, what I could donate to his campaign. In 1976, the Supreme Court handed down what was considered a landmark decision. The decision is called Buckley versus Valeo. Buckley versus Valeo was challenging these aspects of the Federal Election Campaign Act. What Buckley versus Valeo said is that if you are a candidate who wants to spend your own wealth or who wants to exceed the spending limits, so you're told you can spend $1,000 in the primary and you want to spend a gajillion dollars in the primary, Buckley versus Valeo said that the Congress or the legislature cannot stop you from doing that. So if I am a super wealthy person and I want to spend all of my money trying to get myself elected, I am allowed to do that because the precedent of this case is that money in our country equates to political speech. Money in politics is the way we speak. And so those limitations would be a violation of the First Amendment. Unless you as a candidate agree to take public funding. That should sound really familiar. It sounds a lot like our grant system. So if a candidate says, I want to take money from this public pool of funds, then I am limited how much I can spend of my own money or how much I can spend of the campaign's money based on what the law says in terms of like how much can be spent maximum and in the different phases of the election. So Buckley versus Valeo establishes this idea that money is speech. And in the 70s, what we see is that the law works. There is a reduction of money in politics. There is less money being channeled. There is more of an equitable kind of mentality. So who do you think doesn't like that? Well, obviously, people that are running for public office, because there is now less money being donated to their campaigns. We're becoming more technological. Things are becoming more expensive. And as a result, candidates say, we need to find a way to get more money in politics. So Congress and the legislature passed a law in 1979 creating something called soft money. Soft money, as differentiated from hard money, is money that is donated strictly to a political party. So money that's donated to a candidate is dubbed hard money, so it goes to their campaign. Money that is dubbed as soft money is given specifically to a political party. And then the idea is that the political party uses that for civic opportunities. They use that for encouraging people to vote. They use that for all the things that parties do simply beyond the election. Well, you and I well know that this is politics, and the money's certainly going to find a way. So over the next 20 years, what's going to happen is parties are going to start getting astronomical amounts of money because the soft money is not bound by limitations. So soft money can be given to the party in unlimited fashion. And the party is then going to turn around and use that money to advertise, and it really starts to kind of blur the line. And in fact, in 1996, Bill Clinton appeared in an ad paid for by the Democratic Party. And so you might notice, like, at the end of political commercials now, they'll say things like, I'm Hillary Clinton, and I approve of this message. I'm Donald Trump, and I approve of this message. That's telling you that their campaign paid for it. If it doesn't say that at the end, that means the money's coming from another source, which is important according to our laws. Okay, so we got a 20-year period. Money's growing. In 2002, another monumental piece of legislation is passed called the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act. This is Senator McCain, who ran for president in 2008, and now retired Senator Feingold. This was a very bipartisan piece of legislation. Russ Feingold was probably the most liberal person in the Senate at the time, but both men felt very strongly that we need to have real, legitimate campaign finance reform. This law did a number of things. Subsequently, the court has deemed unconstitutional most parts of the legislation. So really what I've listed for you is the part that stands. And we'll get into the other parts later, but you don't really need to know all the details of the legislation. The thing that stands in probably like the legacy of this law is that it closed the soft money loophole. So that today now, post 2002, if I, Shannon Rosenfeld, want to make a donation to the Democratic Party, to the Republican Party, to the Libertarian Party, I am certainly allowed to do so, but it is bound by the same limitation as me donating money to the Clinton campaign or to the Johnson campaign or to the Trump campaign. So the limitations are the same. The number was initially set at $2,000 per donation, like to an individual. That money is indexed for inflation. So every 2 years, that number will rise. I believe right now it's $2,700. So I can get out my checkbook and I can write a $2,700 donation to the GOP, and I can also write a $2,700 check to the Trump campaign. In 2010, there was a decision handed down by the Supreme Court that I personally think will probably be the defining case of the Roberts Court. Chief Justice Roberts, I think that this case really says a lot about what the current court thinks. Citizens United versus the FEC is a case where Citizens United is a political action group, and they had created a movie about then Senator Hillary Clinton. And this movie obviously made her look really bad, and the argument of the FEC was that this movie amounts to political advertising. And they attempted to censor the publication of the movie under the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act because the publication of the movie would have violated some portions of that law. The portions of the law don't really matter. What's important is in Citizens United, what the court established in their decision is they said that this right here, corporations are people. In the eyes of the law, a corporation amounts to a person. And if you are going to allow an individual to say what they want to say, to make a movie, to put on their social media, to put information out about a candidate without restriction, then you can't stop a corporation from doing that either. So in essence, what this case did is it elevated corporate political speech significantly. So that now corporations, it's not that they're not limited, but that their limitations are the same as limitations of individuals. And we have very few limitations on individuals in terms of what they want to say independently or do independently or spend independently of the candidate's campaign. 4 years later, another portion of the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act was passed, and this kind of is like what sealed the nail in the coffin of the BCRA. The case is called McCutcheon versus the FEC. If you read here, it says it removed the aggregate limits for PACs. So back here in 2002, what Senator McCain and Senator Feingold authored is they put a total limit on how much money a PAC could donate to federal elections in total. So let's go back to my PAC, Shannon Rosenfeld for a Better America. In 2002, I would have been allowed, my PAC could have donated $5,000 to people running for the House, $5,000 to different individuals running for the Senate, $5,000 to people running for the president. But once I had reached, I believe it was $95,000, I had to stop donating. So it was $5,000 per candidate with an aggregate limit of $95,000. McCutcheon versus the FEC removed that aggregate limit. So a PAC today is still bound by the individual donation and that they can give $500 to a candidate running for federal office, but there is now no longer an aggregate limit. They may donate $5,000 to every single person running for political office should they choose to do so. Just like way back in that article we looked at, Remembering Creep, where the man in the article had given $150,000 to both Nixon and Humphrey, to